Emma Johnson trembled as she held her ID up to the White House scanner. Her paint-stained hands contrasted starkly with the immaculate marble of the main lobby. She hadn't slept in 24 hours, had run from her part-time job at a daycare center in the poorest neighborhood in the city, and now she was here, in the heart of power, because she was the only candidate available to care for the president's twins in an emergency. The contemptuous glances of the security guards reminded her that she definitely didn't belong in that world. Hello. Before continuing with this story, tell me in the comments where you're listening to me from. I'm excited to imagine the places these words come from. Now, let's get back to this story that will change everything you thought about love and resilience. President Alexander Mitchell had been widowed 2 years earlier in an accident that shocked the entire country. Since then, he had been trying to balance his political career with raising his 6-year-old twins, Matthew and Sophie. That morning, the official nanny had resigned without warning after receiving anonymous threats, and Emma had arrived as the only available option through an emergency agency. When the double doors of the residential wing opened, Emma found herself face to face with the most powerful man in the country. Alexander Mitchell looked nothing like the imposing politician she saw on television. He wore a wrinkled shirt, had deep dark circles under his eyes, and was holding a crying little girl while her brother hid behind the living room curtains. The first few days were a silent hell. Emma slept in a tiny room in the servants' wing, ate in the kitchen with the rest of the domestic staff, and endured the condescending glances of presidential advisors, who whispered behind her back about the impropriety of having a working-class woman so close to the presidential family. But the children adored her from the very beginning. Emma had a natural gift for connecting with them. She read them stories in funny voices, drew with them in a yellow notebook she always carried with her, and at night she sang them the same songs her grandmother had taught her. Little by little, the twins' nightmares disappeared and their smiles returned. Alexander began to notice her during the 3rd week. One night, while reviewing documents in his study, he heard laughter coming from the garden. Peeking out the window, he saw Emma playing barefoot soccer with the children under the patio light. Sophie chased the ball with a joy he hadn't seen in months, and Matthew laughed uproariously as Emma dramatically pretended to stumble. For the first time in 2 years, the White House sounded like home. The transformation didn't go unnoticed. The twins began talking about Emma constantly during family dinners. They told stories about the adventures they had together, the games she invented, and the deep conversations they had sitting in the garden while she taught them how to recognize the constellations. One rainy afternoon, Alexander arrived early to find Emma and the children building a pillow fort in the living room. All 3 were soaked from running in the rain, and Emma had leaves in her hair as she helped Sophie place a blanket as the roof of their makeshift castle. The scene was so natural, so full of life, that Alexander stood motionless on the threshold, watching his family be genuinely happy. That night, for the first time, Alexander joined a bedtime story routine. Emma was reading about dragons and brave princesses when he appeared in the nursery doorway. The twins squealed with excitement and dragged him onto the bed to sit next to Emma. For 20 minutes, the 4 of them were in a different world, far from politics, responsibilities, and the pressures of power. The following weeks brought an unexpected closeness. Alexander began coming home early from work to spend time with the children, but inevitably ended up chatting with Emma. He discovered that she studied pedagogy at night after putting the twins to bed, that she sent money to her ailing mother, and that she had lost her father at a very young age. Emma, for her part, got to know the man behind the public office. Alexander told her about the sleepless nights worrying about decisions that affected millions of people, about the loneliness of power, and about the constant fear of not being a good father to his children. One stormy night, Sophie had a terrible nightmare. Emma ran to comfort her, but the little girl wouldn't calm down. Alexander appeared in his pajamas, and together they managed to calm her down. Emma fell asleep in a chair next to the children's bed, and Alexander covered her with a blanket. The next morning, when Emma woke up, she found a cup of hot tea on the nightstand, and a note that simply said, "Thank you." Their first kiss happened 3 months after their arrival. The twins were at school, and Emma was in the garden reading while waiting for them to return. Alexander had finished a difficult meeting on economic policy and found her sitting under the cherry tree, the sun filtering through the leaves and creating patterns of light on her face. He wordlessly approached her, sat down next to her, and when Emma looked up from her book, something in her gaze completely disarmed him. It wasn't a movie kiss, nor dramatic, nor perfect. It was gentle trembling, filled with doubts and fears, but also with a tenderness neither of them had felt in years. When they broke apart, Emma had tears in her eyes, and Alexander gently caressed her cheek. Keeping their relationship a secret became a necessity and a torture. They stole moments in the kitchen in the early mornings, exchanged knowing glances during family dinners, and Emma kept the notes Alexander left her between the pages of his yellow notebook. Short messages that spoke of gratitude, admiration, and eventually, love. The twins, unwittingly, became his accomplices. One rainy afternoon, Sophie innocently asked why Dad was smiling so much lately, and Matthew commented that Emma seemed happier too. The children began asking Emma to stay for dinner and watch movies with them on the big living room sofa, and gradually, she became more integrated into the family dynamic. The first crisis came when Helen Mitchell, Alexander's mother and one of the most influential women in the country, made a surprise visit. Helen had heard rumors about the closeness between her son and the nanny and arrived to assess the situation. During a tense dinner, she observed every gesture, every glance, every interaction between Emma and her family. Helen was an intelligent woman, and it didn't take long for her suspicions to be confirmed. That same evening, she summoned Emma to the library and spoke to her with calculated coldness about the responsibilities that came with being the president's family. She explained that any scandal could destroy Alexander's political career and, by extension, affect the twins' well-being. Emma emerged from that conversation devastated, but determined. That night, she wrote a letter she never sent, in which she told Alexander about her feelings, her fears, and the impossibility of her situation. She kept the letter in her yellow notebook and made the most difficult decision of her life. The following days were a silent agony. Emma continued with her responsibilities, but became emotionally distant. Alexander noticed the change immediately and tried to talk to her, but Emma avoided being alone with him. The twins also sensed the tension and began asking questions that neither adult knew how to answer. Emma's second transformation occurred during a national crisis. A series of violent protests had erupted in the capital, and the White House was under extreme security measures. The twins were frightened by the noise of helicopters and sirens, and Emma became their emotional refuge. For 3 days, she didn't leave the residential wing, creating a shield of normalcy and tranquility to protect the children from the chaos outside. Alexander watched her from a distance as she navigated the national crisis, and realized that Emma wasn't simply his children's nanny. She was the person who held his family together, the one who provided stability in the midst of the hurricane, the one who had brought joy back to their home. When the situation calmed down, Alexander finally managed to speak with Emma alone. He confessed that he had noticed her distance, that he didn't understand what had changed, and that the children constantly asked him if Emma was sad. Emma, with tears in her eyes, told him about the conversation with her mother and about her own fears of ruining everything he had built. Alexander's response was silent but powerful. He took her hand and led her to his private study, where he showed her a bill he had been secretly preparing. It was an initiative to improve the working and educational conditions of the country's domestic workers and caregivers. In the introduction to the document, he had written about the importance of recognizing and valuing the people who care for our families, directly inspired by his experience with Emma. That night they made love for the first time. It wasn't just a physical encounter, but a fusion of everything they had been suppressing, feeling, and fearing. Emma gave herself completely, leaving behind the social barriers and prejudices that had tormented her. Alexander loved her with an intensity that surprised him, discovering in her not just a lover, but his life partner. The following months were the happiest of both of their lives. Emma was officially still the nanny, but unofficially, she had become an integral part of the presidential family. The twins called her by name, with a kindness that went beyond the professional, and she had found in them the maternal love she had always longed for. Alexander and Emma developed secret routines that kept them connected despite the demands of the presidential office. He left her wildflowers that he picked during their morning walks in the gardens. She made him herbal tea in a special cup they had purchased together during a secret market trip. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, they gathered in the study to talk about their days, their dreams, and their plans for the future. Emma's third transformation came when she decided to enroll in a university program to complete her degree in teaching. Alexander supported her unconditionally, hiring a nanny so Emma could attend classes. Watching her grow intellectually, pursue her dreams, and gain self-confidence made him fall in love with her more and more every day. Emma began to quietly participate in social initiatives related to early childhood education. Her experience with twins and her academic background made her a valuable voice in meetings on public education. Although her participation was unofficial, her influence began to be felt in government decisions related to children. The first major dramatic twist occurred during a state dinner. Emma wasn't present at the official event, but was at the White House babysitting the twins when an investigative journalist named Patricia Morgan arrived with a hidden camera. Patricia had been following rumors about the relationship between the president and his nanny and had managed to infiltrate the event with fake credentials. Patricia found Emma playing with the children in the family room and began recording while asking seemingly innocent questions about her work and her relationship with the presidential family. Emma, unaware she was being recorded, spoke naturally about her love for the twins and her respect for the president. Her words and gestures unwittingly revealed the emotional intimacy between her and the family. The video was maliciously edited and posted on social media, with the scandalous title of The President's Secret Nanny, Seduction or True Love. Within hours, the video went viral. The comments were vicious. Some accused Emma of being a gold digger who had seduced a vulnerable man. Others criticized Alexander for maintaining an inappropriate relationship with an employee. The scandal erupted on a morning that had begun like any other. Emma was having breakfast with the twins when the head of security burst into the dining room to report the situation. Within minutes, Alexander's phone was ringing off the hook. Aides arrived in a state of panic, demanding an immediate response to what was already being hailed as the biggest scandal of his president. Emma locked herself in her room, devastated by the public humiliation. The twins couldn't understand why the adults were so upset, why Emma was crying, and why there were suddenly so many strangers running through the house. Sophie took refuge in Emma's arms, while Matthew repeatedly asked if Emma was going to leave. The media pressure was relentless. Protesters gathered in front of the White House with signs demanding the president's resignation or Emma's immediate expulsion. The news was all about it. Political analysts debated the ethics of the situation, while the political opposition seized on the scandal to attack the government's legitimacy. Helen Mitchell returned immediately, and this time she didn't hold back. She confronted Emma with a coldness that cut through the air. She told her she had ruined her son's reputation, jeopardized his political career, and that the twins would inevitably suffer the consequences of their selfish relationship. Each word was a dagger driven into Emma's heart. That night, Alexander found Emma quietly packing. When he asked her what she was doing, she handed him a resignation letter, along with the love letter she'd never sent. She explained that she had made the decision to step away to protect him and the twins. She told him she loved him too much to allow his presence to destroy everything she had worked to build. Alexander read both letters with tears in his eyes. The love letter revealed the depth of Emma's feelings, her inner struggle between love and duty, and her willingness to sacrifice her own happiness for the sake of her family. The resignation letter was formal and cold, but between the lines, one could read the heartbreaking pain of a woman who was giving up everything she loved most in the world. Saying goodbye to the twins was the hardest part. Emma knelt in front of Sophie and Matthew, trying to explain in simple terms that she had to leave for a while. The children didn't understand why Emma couldn't just stay and be part of their family forever. Sophie clung to her neck and cried until she ran out of tears, while Matthew asked her over and over again when she was coming back. Emma promised them she would always love them, no matter where she was. She gave them her yellow notebook to keep her drawings in, and write letters to when they missed her. She showed them a special constellation in the night sky, and told them that every time they saw it, they would know she was thinking of them. Emma's fourth transformation occurred alone. She returned to her small apartment in the neighborhood where she had grown up, surrounded by the same gray streets and the same problems as always. But now she carried in her heart the experience of having been loved completely, and of having loved without reservation. The first few days were devastating. She would automatically get up at 6 in the morning to make breakfast for the twins, only to remember they were no longer there. Over the next few weeks, Emma fell into a deep depression. She couldn't watch the news, because it inevitably mentioned the presidential scandal. Her former co-workers looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and pity. The media had obtained her address, and occasionally reporters would show up trying to get an exclusive interview. But Emma had something that sustained her. During the darkest nights, she would open the yellow notebook and reread the notes Alexander had written for her, the drawings the twins had made for her, and the small mementos she had saved of their time as a family. Those memories gave her the strength to get up each morning and continue. Little by little, Emma began to rebuild her life. She returned to school with fierce determination, worked part-time jobs to support her expenses, and began volunteering at a neighborhood community center. Her experience with the presidential twins had taught her new techniques that she now shared with working mothers in her community. Meanwhile, at the White House, life had become bleak. The twins were constantly asking about Emma. Sophie had started having nightmares again, and Matthew had become withdrawn and silent. Alexander tried to fill the void Emma had left, but it was clear that children had lost something fundamental in their lives. Alexander was also suffering deeply. The demands of the presidency continued, but he had lost the motivation Emma had restored. Family dinners were silent, weekends felt endless, and at night, he lay awake, reading and rereading the letters Emma had left him. The political pressure eventually eased. Other scandals made headlines, and the public began to forget about the presidential nanny. But for Alexander and the twins, Emma's absence remained an open wound that wouldn't heal. The second dramatic turn occurred 6 months after Emma's departure. Sophie became seriously ill with pneumonia, which doctors could not fully control. During her nights in the hospital, the girl became delirious and called constantly for Emma. Doctors suggested that the presence of emotionally significant others might aid her recovery. But Alexander was torn between his love for his daughter and the political consequences of contacting Emma. One night, when Sophie had a particularly severe respiratory crisis, Alexander made the bravest decision of his political life. Ignoring the objections of his advisors, he asked his security chief to locate Emma and explain the situation. He wasn't asking her to return permanently, just to come help a little girl who desperately needed her. Emma received the call at 2 in the morning. Without a second's hesitation, she took a taxi to the private hospital where Sophie was admitted. When she entered the room and saw the tiny, fragile girl connected to tubes and monitors, her heart broke. She approached the bed, took Sophie's hand, and began softly singing the same songs they had shared for months. Sophie's reaction was immediate and miraculous. Her vital signs stabilized, her breathing calmed, and for the first time in days, she slept peacefully. Doctors couldn't scientifically explain what had happened, but it was clear that Emma's presence had provided the emotional comfort the girl needed to begin her recovery. Emma spent the night in the hospital, sleeping in a chair next to Sophie's bed. When Alexander arrived in the morning with Matthew, the scene he found was heartbreakingly beautiful. Emma was quietly reading stories while Sophie smiled weakly, and Matthew had fallen asleep curled up on Emma's lap. Over the next few days, as Sophie gradually recovered, Emma and Alexander had long conversations about everything that had happened. They talked about the pain of separation, the mistakes they had made, and the impossibility of denying their feelings for each other. Alexander told her about the sleepless nights missing her, how the twins had changed in her absence, and his own struggle to balance his public responsibilities with his private feelings. Emma spoke to him about her growth process during the months apart. She told him about the lonely nights, but also about the lessons she had learned about her own strength, about her capacity to love unconditionally, and about her decision not to regret having loved completely, no matter the consequences. Emma's fifth transformation occurred when she decided she was no longer going to hide or live in fear. During a time away from the presidential family, she had gained a new perspective on her own worth. She no longer saw herself as a mere working-class nanny who had been lucky enough to fall in love with a powerful man. She recognized herself as an intelligent, loving, and capable woman who had contributed significantly to the well-being of a family and deserved to be loved unapologetically. When Sophie was discharged from the hospital, Emma didn't automatically return to the White House. Instead, she set clear conditions. She told Alexander that if they were going to try a relationship again, it had to be based on mutual respect and transparency. No more secrets, no more hiding, and no more allowing others to dictate the terms of their love. Alexander accepted her terms without hesitation. That same week, he called a press conference where, for the first time, he spoke publicly about Emma. He didn't apologize for having found love, but he did apologize for not having been transparent from the beginning. He explained that Emma had been instrumental in his children's emotional recovery after his wife's death, and that she had demonstrated a dedication and genuine love that went beyond any job description. The press conference was broadcast live across the country. Alexander spoke with a sincerity that would disarm his fiercest critics. He recounted the nights Emma had comforted his children's nightmare, his tireless dedication to the family's well-being, and the pure, selfless love he had shown even when he chose to walk away to protect them. Toward the end of the conference, Alexander did something completely unexpected. He invited Emma to join him at the podium. Emma had been watching the broadcast from her apartment, and when she received the call asking her to come immediately to the White House, her heart raced. She knew that moment would define the rest of her life. When Emma appeared at the entrance to the press room, absolute silence fell over the room. She wore a simple but elegant dress, her hair was tied back naturally, and she walked with a dignity that radiated from within. She wasn't the scared out-of-place woman who had arrived months earlier as an emergency nanny. She was a woman who had found her place in the world and wasn't about to apologize for it. Alexander took her hand in front of the cameras and asked her to tell the country who Emma Johnson really was. Emma spoke with a clear and firm voice about her love for the twins, her respect for Alexander as a father and leader, and her commitment to the well-being of the presidential family. She explained that she had never sought fame or personal gain, only the opportunity to care for and love two children who had become the center of her world. The public reaction was mixed but mostly positive. Many women identified with Emma as someone who had worked hard, been unfairly judged, and had shown that true love can overcome any social barrier. Single parents saw in Alexander someone who had put the emotional well-being of his children above political considerations. Of course, there was also criticism. Some conservative sectors questioned the morality of the situation, and the political opposition attempted to capitalize on the scandal. But the honesty and dignity with which both Alexander and Emma handled the situation dispelled much of the controversy. The twins were the happiest, with Emma's official return to their lives. Sophie ran to her after the press conference and hugged her so tightly she almost fell to the ground. Matthew, who had been more emotionally reserved, finally broke down and cried in Emma's arms, telling her he'd been afraid she was never coming back. That night, for the first time in months, the family ate dinner together without tension or secret. Emma took her place at the table not as an employee, but as an integral member of the family. The twins told stories about what they had done during her absence, showed the drawings they had kept in the yellow notebook, and asked Emma to read to them before bed. Emma's sixth transformation was the most profound of all. Over the following months, she became not just Alexander's romantic partner, but a true unofficial first lady. She began accompanying him to public events, actively participated in government educational initiatives, and became a vocal advocate for the rights of domestic workers and caregivers. Her most significant work was the creation of a national support program for single-parent families. Emma used her own experience and training in teaching to develop educational resources and support networks for single parents. The program became one of the most important legacies of Alexander's administration. Emma also completed her degree in teaching, graduating with honors while balancing her family and public responsibilities. Her thesis on the emotional impact of family changes on child development was largely based on her experience with twins and became a reference for other professionals in the field. The relationship between Emma and Helen Mitchell also gradually evolved. Alexander's mother, who had initially been the main opponent of the relationship, began to recognize the positive impact Emma had had on the lives of her son and grandchildren. It wasn't an immediate or easy reconciliation, but Helen eventually accepted that Emma was a genuinely positive influence in the family. A year after the press conference, Alexander proposed to Emma in the same garden where they had first kissed. The proposal wasn't grand or public, it was intimate and perfect. Alexander knelt under the cherry tree while the twins watched from the window, holding their breath. Emma said yes without hesitation, but she said one more condition. She wanted her wedding to be a celebration not only of their love, but also of all the non-traditional families who had found love in unexpected ways. She proposed that the ceremony include elements honoring single mothers, widowed fathers, and all those who had found love after loss. The wedding took place on the White House lawn, but it wasn't the ostentatious affair many had expected. Emma insisted on a simple but meaningful ceremony. They invited the families of White House staff, Emma's classmates, and families who had benefited from her social programs. The twins were the page boys, carrying the rings in a small box decorated with flowers they had painted themselves. Sophie scattered rose petals, as Matthew walked solemnly beside his father. When Emma appeared walking down the makeshift aisle between the chairs, she wasn't wearing a designer dress, but a simple white gown that had belonged to her grandmother, altered by a neighborhood seamstress. The ceremony was officiated by the White House chaplain, but Emma had requested that it include poetry readings that spoke of love transcending social differences. Alexander read a poem by Maya Angelou about everyday love, while Emma recited verses about the strength found in vulnerability. During the exchange of vows, the two spoke without formalities, from the heart. Alexander promised to love not only Emma, but also to honor the wisdom she had brought to his life, the different perspective that had enriched his worldview, and the maternal love that had healed their children's wounds. Emma promised to be by Alexander's side not only in happy moments, but especially during crises, to be a partner who would challenge him to be a better person and a better leader, and to love the twins as if they were her own children. The most emotional moment came when the twins spontaneously approached the altar and hugged Emma, telling her she was now officially their new mother. There wasn't a dry eye throughout the entire ceremony. Their honeymoon was a week in a cabin in the mountains, away from cameras and official responsibilities. They brought the twins with them because Emma insisted their new family had to start together. It was days of hiking, campfires, board games, and long conversations about the future. During those starry nights, Emma and Alexander planned not only their personal lives, but also the social projects they wanted to develop together. Emma had ideas for expanding educational programs nationwide, while Alexander dreamed of policies that would truly improve the lives of working families. The return to reality brought new challenges, but also new opportunities. Emma officially assumed the role of First Lady, but she completely redefined it. Instead of limiting herself to ceremonial duties, she became an active activist for education and the rights of working women. Her first project as First Lady was the creation of community-based early childhood educational centers in the country's poorest neighborhoods. Emma personally visited each center, worked directly with mothers and children, and used her practical experience to constantly improve the programs. The media, which had initially been critical, began to recognize the genuine impact Emma was having. Her programs were achieving measurable results: more children accessing quality preschool, more mothers gaining professional training, and entire communities being transformed through education. Emma's seventh transformation occurred when she realized that her personal story had become an inspiration for thousands of women. She received letters from domestic workers who had decided to return to school, from single mothers who had found the courage to pursue their dreams, and from young people who saw in her proof that social barriers could be overcome. Emma decided to write a book about her experience. It wasn't a sensationalized autobiography, but an honest account of love, resilience, and the importance of not giving up on one's dreams. The book was simply titled The Yellow Notebook, in honor of the object that had held her most precious moments. The book became a national and international bestseller. Emma donated all the profits to the educational foundation she had created. During the book launches, She spoke not only about her romance with the president, but also about the importance of valuing care work, fighting for education, and believing in the transformative power of authentic love. The twins grew up happy and well-adjusted in this new family environment. Sophie had become a self-confident girl who loved books and dreamed of becoming a teacher like Emma. Matthew developed a passion for social justice, inspired by the conversations he overheard between Emma and Alexander about how to improve the country. 2 years after the wedding, Emma announced she was pregnant. The news was greeted with joy, not only by the family, but also by the entire country. The twins were thrilled at the thought of having a little brother, and Alexander was overjoyed at the prospect of experiencing fatherhood from the very beginning with Emma. The pregnancy was uneventful, but Emma continued to work tirelessly on her social program. She visited communities, gave lectures, and remained an active presence in the country's political life. Her pregnancy brought her even closer to the working mothers she collaborated with, sharing the same worries and joys of motherhood. The third dramatic twist in the story came during the 7th month of pregnancy. A journalistic investigation revealed that Patricia Morger, the reporter who had started the original scandal, had been paid by political opponents to create the controversy. The video had been biasedly edited, and the seemingly innocent questions had been specifically designed to elicit responses that could be misinterpreted. The revelation caused an even bigger scandal than the original. The media outlets that had attacked Emma were forced to publicly apologize. The politicians who had tried to capitalize on the controversy were exposed as unscrupulous manipulators, and Emma, who had endured months of public humiliation, was finally fully vindicated. But Emma surprised everyone with her reaction. Instead of seeking revenge or gloating over her vindication, she used the moment to speak about forgiveness and the importance of overcoming political divisions. At a press conference, she said she held no grudges against those who had attacked her, because those experiences had made her stronger and more committed to her social. The birth of Isabella Emma Mitchell was celebrated nationwide. She was a perfect little girl, with her mother's dark eyes and her father's mischievous smile. The twins grew into protective and loving older siblings, and Alexander discovered a new dimension of happiness watching Emma become a mother. The following years brought stability and growth for the entire family. The twins, now 8 years old, had fully adapted to their new family dynamic. Sophie developed a special talent for writing and began creating her own children's stories, while Matthew demonstrated exceptional skills in math and science. Emma continued to expand her educational programs, which now operated in every state in the country. Her foundation had become an international model, and she received visits from delegations from other countries interested in replicating her methods. The relationship between Emma and Helen Mitchell eventually blossomed into a genuine friendship. Helen, who had witnessed Emma's personal growth and positive impact on her family, became one of her most ardent supporters. She even began collaborating with Emma's programs, using a social influence to raise funds and generate support. When it was time for Alexander to step down as president, Emma already had clear plans for her future. She wanted to fully dedicate herself to her educational work and write more books on pedagogy and child development. She also dreamed of opening a community college that would offer affordable higher education for working adults. On the day of the presidential transition, Emma walked the halls of the White House for the last time as First Lady. She paused in each room, recalling specific moments. The first time she had comforted Sophie's nightmares, the late-night conversations with Alexander in his study, the afternoons of playing in the garden, the family breakfasts in the kitchen. When she arrived at the garden where it all began, she found a surprise. The twins and Isabella, now 3 years old, had planted a small cherry tree in the same spot where Emma and Alexander had first kissed. Next to the tree, they had placed a small plaque that read, "Where our family began." The new life outside the White House brought different challenges and joys. Emma set up her office in a comfortable house in a middle-class neighborhood, close to the children's schools. The house had a large yard where Isabella could play, and a study where Emma could write and plan her projects. The first few months were a time of adjustment. After years of working with domestic help, Emma returned to cooking for her family, grocery shopping, and managing daily household routines. Far from being a burden, these chores reconnected her with the simplicity she had always valued. Alexander found work as a public policy consultant and university professor. He enjoyed the freedom to express his opinions without the restrictions of presidential office and spending more time with his family. Family dinners turned into passionate debates on social issues, with each family member contributing their perspectives. Emma published a second book, Building Bridges, which focused on pedagogical strategies for working with children from different socioeconomic backgrounds. The book became a reference text at several universities, and Emma began receiving invitations to speak in various countries. They celebrated their 5th wedding anniversary by renewing their vows in an intimate ceremony in their new garden. This time, Isabella served as flower girl, and the twins, now 11, gave moving speeches about what Emma had meant to their lives. During the ceremony, Emma reflected on the importance of celebrating not only the big moments, but also the everyday love that is built day by day. In her renewed vows, she spoke of gratitude for the small family routines, the after-dinner conversations, the nights spent helping with chores, and the satisfaction of building a home filled with love and purpose. In his vows, Alexander acknowledged that Emma had not only been his romantic partner, but also his teacher, and the importance of keeping one's feet on the ground, never forgetting where one came from, and using any privilege to serve others. Emma Johnson's story inspired an entire generation of young women who saw in her proof that it was possible to transform personal circumstances through hard work, education, and determination. Her foundation received thousands of applications each year from young women who wanted to follow in her footsteps in social and educational. 12 years after arriving as an emergency nanny at the White House, Emma was invited to give the keynote address at her alma mater's graduation. In front of hundreds of young people just beginning their professional careers, Emma shared the most important lessons she had learned along the way. He spoke to them about the importance of embracing unexpected opportunities, not allowing fear to paralyze them, and always remembering that true success is measured by the positive impact they have on the lives of others. He reminded them that every person has something valuable to contribute to the world, regardless of their background or initial circumstances. At the end of her speech, Emma pulled out her yellow notebook, already worn and filled with notes, drawings, and memories spanning more than a decade. She told the graduates about the importance of documenting their own growth, celebrating their small and large achievements, and never forgetting where they came from or where they want to go. That night at home, while helping Isabella with a school project about diverse families, Emma realized that her story had been completely full of circles. Isabella had chosen to present her own family as an example of how love can create bonds that go beyond blood ties. The twins were already in high school, excelling academically and remaining committed to community service. Sophie had decided she wanted to study journalism to tell stories that would inspire social change, while Matthew expressed interest in studying law to work on public policies that would benefit working families. Emma felt deeply satisfied knowing that she had managed not only to build a happy family, but also to raise her children with strong values and a deep understanding of social justice. From a young age, Isabella displayed the same sensitivity toward others that had characterized Emma, vowing to continue the family legacy of service and compassion. And so she understood that true love isn't measured by what we possess, but by the people who decide to stay by our side and grow alongside us. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments from which country you're listening. Which part moved you the most? Like it if you believe we all deserve a second chance at love, and subscribe for more stories that speak directly to the heart. Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't to leave, but to choose to stay and build something beautiful from scratch.